So hello and welcome everybody to our May FLT Connect event, which is an end-to-end panel discussion. So we have three panelists here who I'm very grateful to them. They are donating their time tonight to share their stories and their experiences and hopefully to give some inspiration to those of you who are either just curious about an end-to-end hike or who might be actively planning or in the midst of an end-to-end hike of the Finger Lakes Trail. So I'll introduce them in just a minute, but first introduce myself. I'm Kristen Post. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications for the Finger Lakes Trail Conference. And I want to tell you a little bit before we get started about the Finger Lakes Trail Conference. The FLTC was founded in 1962, so we are approaching our 60th anniversary year next year, which is really exciting, and you'll be seeing all kinds of fun events to celebrate our 60th anniversary year next year. The trail was built and is maintained entirely by volunteers. So we have a whole structure. We have our volunteer board of managers. We have, I think, 13 regional trail coordinators spread across the trail. So those folks have responsibility for a larger region. And then underneath that, we have our trail sponsors and our trail maintainers who are responsible for maintaining smaller sections, a mile up to, I don't know, many miles. So when you're on the trail, just know that a volunteer has tended to it. Volunteer has painted those blazes. A volunteer makes sure that it is passable for you after storms. They make arrangements for any trees to be removed after blowdowns. Volunteers do everything to support the trail. We are a 501c3 organization, and we are mostly funded by membership dues and donations. So if you are already a member, I want to say thank you very much for your membership. If you are not, I hope you will consider becoming a member. Membership dues and donations underwrite everything we do. They underwrite trail projects, they underwrite programs like the one you are in tonight. They underwrite our larger events on the trail and some of our hiking programs, as well as all of our communications. So our electronic monthly newsletter, footnotes, our print publication, FLT News, everything. So thank you again for being here tonight. We have with us Marnie Phillips, Scott Geiger, and Heather Houskeeper, all of whom have completed in very different ways end-to-end hikes of the Finger Lakes Trail. So our format for tonight is that they're each going to share for about 10 to 15 minutes sort of the highlights of their experience on the Finger Lakes Trail, and then we will open it up to questions. Some people did submit questions in advance. You can submit your questions using the chat function. I'll keep an eye on that, and I'll be monitoring those. And we will allow people to unmute for some questions at the end, but we want to ask everybody to please stay muted while our panelists are speaking so that we can avoid any background noise. And I want to give special thanks to, you'll notice Heather Houskeeper has got some like green leaves and sunshine behind her. That's because she is currently on another long distance hike and she made it into her campsite just in time for this presentation tonight. She's joining us directly from the trail, which is really cool. So first, I'm going to turn over to Marnie Phillips, who hiked the Finger Lakes Trail with her dog, Alfred P dog, who I think might make an appearance tonight. I don't know. So we're going to let Marnie kick it off for us. And again, thank you all for being here. Go ahead, Marnie.
Okay, hi. Let's make this work. So, okay, you guys are seeing this? Yeah, good. So hi guys, it's great to be here. My name is Marnie. I walked the Finger Lakes Trail over 2 months back in the summer of 2016 with my dog. Even though I live in DC, I still form really special connections with the trail and the people I met, and so I'm really glad to be able to talk to you tonight. So I was asked to talk about what it's like to backpack with a dog. And what I have to say is it's really hard work. Along with all the usual challenges of backpacking, you also have responsibility for this dog. And, you know, finishing together requires kind of a constant situational awareness to prevent any trip ending issues. And along the way, you might have wet feet, blisters, scary wildlife or dog encounters, you know, and so why on earth would anyone want to take on this job? So I'll try to answer that question with a very brief story of our trip across the Finger Lakes Trail. This is my dog, Alfred P dog. Here he's on a traverse of the Presidential Range in the White Mountains. But he wasn't always so hardcore. He started out small and underweight on the day, this is him on the day we brought him home from the shelter 3 years earlier. He'd been found on the streets of DC, dragging a leash behind him, and he'd been hit by a car. And the shelter had him for a long time, and they weren't going to keep him much longer, really. So I'm glad we found him when we did. So it turned out I really loved hiking with him. He joined me on climbing trips, and like other dogs I had hiked with, I found he needed very little instruction or encouragement to be a great trail dog, very focused on his mission of hiking the trail. But you know, now he hates to miss a trip, and he camps out on my bags before every trip, make sure I don't leave him at home. So our first big adventure together was a section hike of the Appalachian Trail. It was about 430 miles. That was my first solo long distance hike the year before we did the FLT. And we learned a lot. And I like the challenge of figuring out how to backpack safely and successfully with a dog. And I was hooked. So the following year I wanted to do it again, but this time I wanted to do a complete trail, not a section. But I only had 2 to 3 months in the summer to do it. So I went looking for a trail, and I picked the FLT, having never heard of it before. Why the FLT? Well, it's a good question. Turns out there's only 8 long distance trails that were the length that I wanted to do. And of these, only 2 really allow dogs, you know, legally, if you care, along their entire length. The Idaho Trail really wasn't suitable terrain for dogs. That would be a whole nother kind of adventure. And Finger Lakes Trail was it, so that's how we picked it. We spent about, excuse me, it's getting over a cold, a month preparing mail drops and gear. And this is some of the gear I found especially useful with him. Was a thin pad trimmed to fit the entire tent floor, which gave him some insulation and also protected the floor from his paws. And when he was wet from hiking in the rain or muddy, I could just throw him in there at the end of the day and let him dry off and clean himself up, you know, while I made dinner. And by the time I got in, he'd be clean. High density food was important, a very high calorie food for working dogs. It was low bulk since you have to carry it. I carried about 1 pound a day for him. I carried a 15-foot small nylon leash that I could tie to my pack waist belt for hands-free hiking, which is helpful, and a small cut piece of foam to help insulate make his dog bed basically, and give him an extra place to rest during the day. I carried some first aid items also. The things I found most useful for him were Benadryl, paw ointment, like that beeswax ointment that actually we both shared to prevent chafing. And the Pro Tick remover is really a fabulous tick remover, especially for removing very tiny nymphs. We check for ticks every night, and I use that quite a bit. I use that everywhere. And there were some optional things I brought. I brought a fleece-lined waterproof coat, which was nice for extra warmth. And that actually was his dog bed, basically. He laid on that and the foam pad. Booties were counterproductive. They caused blisters on him. And really what he needed was to build up his paw calluses from abrasive surfaces from road walking. And once he had done that, he was fine. I always bring a dog pack to help lighten the load so he can carry his food. And it's great, but I've always ended up customizing and having to fix and repair every pack I've carried, and sometimes end up carrying it myself for chunks of the trip. So once we had our gear sorted, we started at the western end of the Finger Lakes Trail in Allegheny State Park. At the time, I didn't carry a smartphone, and I carried, so I navigated entirely off the paper maps. And, you know, with so little foot traffic, the trail's not always obvious. We were following directions like take the second sharp left into the woods. So, you know, by the third day, we were off route, and all I could see, like I could hear the interstate. And so we headed towards that, and we ended up in a mud-filled dike along the interstate, covered in mud. It was over Alfred's head. It pulled off my shoes. Like, it was a mess. And when we finally made it back to the trail, I was like, what am I doing? Is this just a crazy idea? Maybe this whole thing was a mistake. And then two things happened. The first was we ran into Larry Blumberg and his group, who was hiking in the opposite direction. And they reassured us that it was blazed ahead of us. We would be able to find the trail. And the second thing that happened was on a blistering road walk out of Salamanca. A sedan slowed down beside us. I was, of course, a little afraid. All of a sudden, a hand pops out the window holding not one, but two Good Humor ice cream cones. And you could just imagine, boy, that greatly improved our outlook on things and led to Alfred P. Dog's first rule of through hiking, which was always take candy from strangers. And after that, we made it back on the trail, and we discovered one of the biggest advantages of the FLT, which is the solitude. We were alone at beautiful shelters night after night. Most nights we were alone at the shelter. And that was a really luxurious feeling compared to the Appalachian Trail, where people were literally sleeping like sardines in lean-tos, and it could be hard even to find a spot to pitch your tent. So here's Alfred. He's just hanging out. And some of the other advantages, we also found it to be a really soft trail that was nice on paws, nice on your joints. It wasn't eroded, having so little foot traffic. It was just really nice to walk. And the other great advantage is the wonderful trail support community. I can't even really I don't think I have time to talk about all the people that we met on the trail and all the volunteers. So here's just a few, including Scott, who's going to speak after me, who took this photo, who we met on M12. And local FLT legends, Radical Ray and Java Joe, and Joe's amazing backpacking dog, Pumpkin. And the wonderful women of the Walking Wednesday group, who we ran into doing trail maintenance on M21. If you see this white bar, that's a blaze hanging from a tree. And just to emphasize, you know, what I think makes this trail so special, so different from other trails. Weeks after my hike, this beautiful handmade bowl showed up at my doorstep. And this was hand-made from the tree that we had tried and failed to remove from the trail that day. You know, part of the reason I think we got to know so many people on the trail like this was really Alfred, because he, you know, he loves rest stops and sometimes he refuses to leave. So here he's just goofing around, hanging out on the big chair in M9. Here he is a little off trail, introducing me to some locals on the Genesee River. Yeah, speaking of Genesee, actually, we were offered more beer on the Finger Lakes Trail than anywhere else I've ever hiked. People also offered us food, lodging, company. One homeowner invited us into her house and fed us an entire gallon bag of freezer cookies, and told me about how she had spent her childhood foraging in the area with her mother, actually. And I think it's these connections and small kindnesses that are what I really remember about the trail the most. And despite all these great things, there's also some unique challenges on the Finger Lakes Trail when you're hiking with dogs. The road walks in summer can be really hot and tough on the paws. It could sometimes take us hours to go a mile. It took us 4 hours to climb the mile out of Watkins Glen, for example. And, you know, Alfred's, because he just needed shade and he needed rest in the heat of the summer. And here he is giving me the stare. She gave me pretty often, which means I'm not going any further. He would just plop down on the side of the road under a patch of shade, and I had no choice but to join him for as long as he needed. And as frustrating as that was, I just had to accept that, okay, you know, this is just what we're doing now. And it reminded me that this was really, you know, his hike. It wasn't mine at all. Insects can be a nuisance. Local dogs are gonna meet local dogs, and I just learned to use my strongest sort of voice to tell them to go home, and good posture. And it was scary, but ultimately not dangerous. Wildlife, of course, can be a hazard, and dogs can be a hazard to wildlife. Alfred developed an overuse injury that he needed to rest and got anti-inflammatories from a local vet. After that, he was great. We didn't meet any hunters, but there's a lot of gunshot in many of the sections. So that can be kind of unnerving. Nutrition. Yeah, man, Alfred is a 50-pound dog. And when he hikes long distances, his calorie needs just skyrocket past mine. So that means that along with the pound of food I fed him per day, I had to supplement his food. And this is him at a shelter on the Appalachian Trail, before and after devouring a large pizza himself, the entire thing, which he was very proud of, and conquered the box afterwards. Don't do this, don't feed your dog pizza. It's really bad for them. Spices can be toxic for them, don't do this. But you know, that's all I could get for him there. And I was really worried about him. I could see his ribs, he was losing weight. And I think it's just an example of one of the challenges of keeping your backpacking dog fed on the trail. So I guess that brings me back to the question, like, why do this? And I think it's really to experience a different kind of adventure from backpacking solo. Alfred slowed me down for sure, a lot. And he taught me, take the time just to enjoy where you are, rest when you need to. Like other dogs I've seen, it's weird, he enjoys the views. He knows about, you know, he knows what he's looking at. And if we pass a beautiful, expansive view, he will stop and lay down and appreciate it. He loves sunsets. He just, you know, taught me to stay a while longer. So I guess it's, you know, for me, backpacking, it's really all about the challenge. I don't tend to go hiking regularly for fun. I like the physical and mental growth that comes from backpacking, solving problems, and the end goal. And I guess hiking with a dog sort of helped me appreciate the journey and the people along the way too. So we finished with some tears, and it was over in the eastern terminus, and my husband met us in the trailhead parking lot. Alfred ignored him. He ran past him. He jumped into the driver's side window. That was it. He was all done. And that was his last long hike, actually. He's done a lot of hikes since then, just not as long. He's about 10 now, and he's not very heat tolerant. And he really, I don't know, he likes a comfy bed at the end of the day, I think. So I'll just say quickly, thanks to my family for support, my husband, Matt, and my daughter, who started her through hiking life on Matt's back across England and took her first steps on a long distance trail on a cliff top. So I hope, thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you have lots of questions afterwards. And do I have time? I have other answers to questions Christy asked if we have time.
And one question that came in for you while you were speaking was, what time of year did you hike?
It was May to July, May 22nd to July 22nd.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and we do have a couple questions specifically for Marnie about hiking with dogs, which we'll get to at the end. Okay. But right now, we will turn it over to, if you could stop sharing your screen, Marnie. We will turn it over to Scott Geiger.
All right. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. So unlike Marnie and Heather, I hiked the trail a little differently. Both of them did a through hike, and my hike was actually a section hike. However, I did a couple other unique things with it. The first thing that was unique about my hike, I was number 476 of an end-to-end, but I was the first official person to actually do the hike out and back. And so technically, I hiked it twice. I only get credit once, and we can talk about at the end with questions about why that is. But all of my hikes, I would park, hike out to a turnaround point, and then hike back the opposite direction, following the trail in just the reverse direction. And part of that was because most of my hikes were solo. My average hike was around 18 to 19 miles in a single day, and I didn't know too many people that actually willingly wanted to do that.
I know.
A friend of mine did actually join me on a few, but I also like the solitude. You know, I think Marnie and Heather will probably, Marnie spoke to that, and I'm sure Heather will too.
He did.
In and out. And I think we got somebody unmuted. But I think you know, one of the nice things about the FLT, and Marnie talked about that, was there is a lot of solitude, and it's kind of nice. The other kind of unique thing that I did is about halfway through, I started writing up my hikes in long story format. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to show a few things here. I'm going to talk about the hike. It took me 10 years over from 2010 through 2019. But I started writing about halfway through. So I'll go ahead and share, and I will bring up my blog site here. And so I started writing these long stories. And so they're a little different maybe than some of the hiking blogs you might have seen before. That some hikers, it's a very short synopsis. I found I really enjoyed writing. And so I wanted to write these lengthy articles or lengthy stories. And the initial impetus for this was really for myself. I wanted to remember things. I didn't, you know, I wanted to remember all of the way I felt, the smells, the sights, the sounds around me. And so I wrote very lengthy. And so I started writing them in my blog here. And I linked in a lot of different things. And so, and I gave them names, some of them a little ordinary, the last overnight, day 1, day 2. And so, you know, and then if you go into them, there's the picture at the top with a map showing the directions, or showing my trail route, and then a link to photos. And so if you link to photos, it goes out here to Google Photos. And one of the things that I didn't learn until, unfortunately, later on in hiking the trail, I grew up doing using a 35mm film camera. And so I still have that mentality, even with a digital camera, where you save your film, you only take the perfect shot. And so early on, I did not take nearly enough photos. As I got through the trail further and further and further, I learned, you know, it's a digital camera, take hundreds, literally. And so what I would start doing is that I would take all of these photos, and then I would provide info on them. So if you click that info button, you get, okay, where is this, a description of it, when it was taken, and I linked it into the actual GPS location as well, so that other people could see, okay, this is where it's located. This is what you're looking at, and this happens to be near Little Rock City, which was towards the end of my hike. So my hike started in early March. It started on Michigan Hollow Road on M17, which is about pretty close to the middle of the trail. And the reason it started there is I'm from Binghamton, and I had worked in Ithaca for almost a year, and I commuted between Binghamton and Ithaca. And so I knew 96B, and the FLT crosses 96B. And so in March, you know how it is. You get that warmish day. It's 40, 45 degrees. It feels glorious. You just want to get out after the long winter that is, you know, just been cooping you up. And so that was what happened. It was one of these days. And I had hiked a lot of the little parks and trails around Binghamton. I wanted to find something new. And I'd grown up in the woods. I'd grown up in the countryside, hiking, camping, doing all of that. And I really wanted to get back to that. And so I started Googling, and I stumbled across the Finger Lakes Trail website. And there was a spreadsheet that, and Marnie mentioned the legend, Java Joe Davies. He maintained this spreadsheet of all the access points across the FLT. Deb Nero has taken that on and has just posted an update recently to the website. But it listed all of these access points. And I saw, hey, one's near 96B. I know that road. I've driven there hundreds of times. And so I took off and headed up and started out. And initially, I actually parked in the wrong place and ended up hiking part of the Abbott Loop, but got to the main trail and was, you know, moving along. And I got to my turnaround point. I'd started later in the day, and I realized, okay, I got to turn back. I can't keep going, but I really, really wanted to keep going. I wanted to see what was around that next corner, but I knew I didn't have enough time, so I headed back reluctantly. And about a month or so later, I went out again and started where I turned around, and this time I went longer and took more time. And really what kept driving me was that I wanted to see what was around the next corner. There were so many interesting sights and views and all sorts of things along the trail. I just didn't want to stop. And so I continued on through 2010, just moving forward. And it really wasn't until towards the end of 2010 that I really started thinking about maybe I could do the entire trail. But I knew it was going to take me a long time. At the time, you know, how much I had traveled, you know, how much I was doing, I figured it was going to take me about 13 years. So I had a lot of time to do a lot of things. And so I realized I need to set some smaller goals for myself along the way, or some, not necessarily smaller, but some goals along the way. And so one of the things, of course, I wanted to do an overnight hike. But the other thing that I wanted to do was to do what I called a marathon hike. Now, I'd been hiking 15, 16, 17, 18 miles during 2010. And so I'd already hit the half marathon mark. But I wanted to see, can I get to 26.2 miles or more? So I started back again on the trail in 2011. I had purchased myself a GPS unit. So you can see on the screen here, this is 2010. I didn't have a track because I didn't have a GPS unit. So for Christmas, I bought myself a GPS unit, a Garmin GPS map unit, which I used for many, many years. I ended up finally replacing it with an app on my phone. My phone got much more robust in the intervening years. So 2011, I had my GPS. I was recording my tracks. I started recording data. I'm a computer guy. I like data. I'm a data geek. And so I started recording data in a spreadsheet. And so this is what I ended up coming up with. And so you can see here, I record my miles, moving, stop, total time, average move, average overall. And eventually I started calculating feet per mile, and calculating out how many calories I was burning estimated, and total miles, and so on. And then by the time I got to the end, I was able to do this aggregate and see that, well, you know, in 2019, I did the most number of hikes. I had 10 hikes. And, you know, I can see how the total ascent and so on. You'll notice on here that the total miles is 1,248 miles. And if you look at the statistics of the FLT, one way is about 560 to 580 miles. So I have more than double here. And part of the reason I have more than double is I actually went back and re-hiked a couple of reroutes over towards the Catskills region, because I wanted to do those, and I'm glad I did. They were some great experiences. So I ended up actually getting a little bit more than double of the trail. And you can see I have a low year. 2018 was only 4 hikes. That was due to weather and scheduling and so on and so forth. But I continued on. And so in 2011, I had the GPS unit. I wanted to do an overnight. And the weather just did not cooperate. I really didn't want to camp in the rain. I wanted to have 2 good weekend days to hike, and it just did not work for me. So I had to forego that. 2012 came and I decided, you know what, I'm going to do my marathon hike. And July 1st, 2012 dawned, and I started off from Bowman Lake State Park, hiked out about 13-ish miles and back, ended up with 26.88 miles round trip. It took me just under 12 hours to do. When I got back to Bowman Lake State Park, I threw my pack in my car, drove around to the beach, and walked right in because I was just so tired and so done at that point. I did finally get my first overnight the following year, September 7th through 8th in 2013. And unlike the marathon hike, which fortunately was probably the flattest section I could have picked, my first overnight was probably the ruggedest section. It was in the Catskills. And boy, did I misplan that one. I thought I could make 14 miles to a lean-to, and I think I made about 8 to a different lean-to. It forced me to wade through about a mile worth of briar patch to get to it. And so it was very much, did not work out the way that I had planned by any stretch of the imagination. But it taught me a lot. My pack was too heavy. And so I learned to reduce my pack weight. I learned to dress better. At that point, I was still wearing jeans and a tech shirt. I changed into having smart wool socks and using nylon pants that are rip resistant, tear resistant, and lightweight and zip off. And so you learn stuff as you go along. But one of the things I wasn't ever really worried about in hiking, and Christy and I had a conversation about this earlier, I didn't feel like I had to know everything. I knew I would learn along the way. And yeah, there would be some pain involved in it, but I learned, and it was such an experience. It was such an adventure. Seeing all these different parts of New York State, from the Catskills in the east, all the way through Watkins Glen, Ithaca area, out through Bath, and then finally way out west in Allegheny State Park. And the topography changes so much, and the scenery changes so much. You could be walking through a small town in one place, and another place, you're way out in the middle of nowhere, and no one's around. And then, of course, you're hiking along M12 and you run into Alfred P. Dog and Marnie hiking along, and go figure. And it was kind of a surprise. I saw her and Alfred coming through, and those of you that hiked a little bit in some of the less traveled areas, seeing someone on the trail is kind of a treat. And so she came up and introduced herself, and I introduced myself, and I said, "Oh, I know who you are." And she said, "Oh, I know who you are." And so we chatted for a while. I asked if I could take the picture of her that she showed there, of her and Alfred. And so, like Marnie said, meeting people along the trail, it is kind of a treat. I've run into so many great people along the trail and chatted with them, for a couple minutes to, many minutes. But it's been a wonderful adventure. And that was part of the motivation with the blog here, that I wanted to share that with other people, in addition to keeping the memories for myself. Unfortunately, I didn't start writing until about halfway through. So I've gone back and rewritten a few, and I'm hoping that I'll find the time to get through and maybe write up. I still have to write up most of 2012, 2013, and 2014. So I've still got a few years I got to go back and write, and I hope to be able to share those stories with everyone. So that's my interesting story. And I think Heather is up next.
She is, and let me say this. Well, and about Marnie. So Marnie. Both Scott and Heather. The course of hike. So it's interesting that they're all here part of this panel discussion. But Heather is.
Christy. You're echoing. Have you got your phone and your computer on?
I'll turn it off. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is that better? Okay.
It's lovely.
Okay. So Heather, to you.
Hey, so my highlights of the Finger Lakes Trail. I'm gonna speak really off the cuff here. I don't have any any screen sharing to offer, but I know a number of you have probably seen some of my slideshow presentations with the conference before. But I'll just tell you a little bit about my hike that I did in 2015. I set out to hike the whole main trail and then also the 6 branch trails as one continuous through hike. And I had a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, I was wanting to do more than, I believe the main trail's 545, somewhere in there. Somewhere in there. Somewhere in there.
It changes every year.
Okay. Well, I think it was around that when I was doing it. But I wanted to do more miles. I wanted a longer duration out on the trail, and I thought, well, how can I make that happen? And I looked at the mileage for the branch trails, and I realized, wow, well, if I do all of those, that'll bring me up to about 850. And I also very much wanted to explore as much of New York as possible. I grew up in Northeast Pennsylvania and, have hiked quite a bit in PA, and New Jersey and New York were really those places that I was most frequently called to, honestly, because the Appalachian Trail was closest in New Jersey. Harriman State Park was very close to me where I was in Pennsylvania. Harriman State Park is also in New York. So that was kind of my stomping grounds, but I'd really only experienced, a piece of it. And I hiked the Appalachian Trail back in 2008. And so I did hike the AT through New York. But again, it's really a very small piece of New York State. So I'd never been up to Niagara Falls. Let me think about this. I'd never been to the Finger Lakes. So I wanted to see as much as I could. And I thought, well, if I do the branch trails, that will surely give me quite an overview. And to do that, I reached out to the Finger Lakes Trail community, introduced myself, and told them what my plan was. And people were so incredibly receptive. I mean, the people that make up the Finger Lakes Trail community they're amazing. And that is one of the greatest highlights of my through hike on the Finger Lakes Trail. I mean, I had so many folks just welcome me with open arms and say, oh, if you need a ride, I can pick you up. I can drop you off here. Come stay the night with us. We'll feed you. You can stay the night with us for multiple nights. We'll slack pack you. So just so impressive that way, and so kind, and really just unique to the Finger Lakes Trail. I mean, you will meet wonderful people with any trail community that you reach out to, but I just feel like the Finger Lakes Trail really stands out. Just in the
second that.
Yeah, Marnie, as you were sharing your story about all the trail magic, and I thought, man, I can relate to that. yeah I mean, just very impressive. So that was a major highlight, and that made my through hike of the main trail and the 6 branch trails possible. Had it not been for the Finger Lakes Trail community, that would not have been feasible. I mean, I guess I could have done what Scott did. I could have hiked up the branch trail and then hiked back, but I wasn't looking for that many miles. So what I did was I hiked along the main trail and then proceeded off onto a branch trail, and then had someone pick me up at the end and bring me back to the main trail where I would carry on again. My other purpose in hiking the Finger Lakes Trail was to study the plants that I encountered along the way, specifically the edible and medicinal plants. As I said before, I grew up in Northeast PA, but I'd been living in North Carolina. I'd lived in North Carolina for nearly the last 12 years before that hike. And I had, sorry, going back through my timeline here. I did live for a period of time in Port Jervis, New York, which is right on the border there of PA, as well. But really a lot of my adult exploration on trail was in North Carolina. I'd hiked a long distance trail across North Carolina, the Mountains to Sea Trail. So I thought I really want to return to my roots and really get to know the plants of my region. And I also wanted to put down roots in the Northeast, which I have now again. But the plants that I found while I was hiking, I started June 3rd and finished August 3rd, so exactly 2 months. It was just prime plant time. I mean, so many delicious wild edibles. Plants too, like ramps. Right now I'm on the Mid-State Trail, Pennsylvania's long distance trail, and I have yet to see a single ramp. Which just kind of blows my mind because I'm out here in ramp season. It's getting a little late now, but ramps were just everywhere on the Finger Lakes Trail. And that is a plant that you want to harvest responsibly. Take just the leaf, not the bulb. But I mean, just these precious plants that were just in abundance out there that I have not seen on other trails. Wood nettle, which a lot of us call stinging nettle. That I would consider the Finger Lakes Trail official plant, for better or for worse.
I'll second that.
Oh man, it goes through pants.
Oh man, today I was going through just a little bit of wood nettle on the Mid-State Trail, and I was like, this is nothing. This is compared to nettle up to my armpits.
It doesn't, the dogs don't seem to mind it at all.
No, the dogs don't. And Marnie, on a side note, I so enjoyed hearing your story of your hiking with your dog. I have my dog out here on the Mid-State.
I heard. How's it going?
It's going good, but everything you said is so true. It is so much work. It is so much work and so different from hiking solo.
It's like having a baby.
It is. Yeah. Like
it's
I'm
the same.
for a toddler and just constantly thinking about his needs, like all the time. Yeah.
I had only hiked with him, 2 long hikes with him, and then I did the Northville Placid Trail alone, and it was like I was light as air. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I didn't know long distance hiking could feel so freeing, and wonder it was a delight. Yeah, it's really different.
Yeah, well, and it made me feel better to know that you were carrying at least a pound of food a day for him, because I'm carrying 2 full food bags, which is just like incredible. It's an incredible amount of weight. But yeah, so the Finger Lakes Trail, I was solo, and like Marnie and Scott, I enjoyed that solitude. I enjoyed the community when they showed up, which was regularly. But I also really enjoyed, as Marnie said, getting to a shelter, and I had it all to myself. And the number of shelters on the Finger Lakes Trail is just astounding. I mean, I was so grateful too, because when I hiked for those 2 months, I've joked that it was like the great monsoon of 2015. I mean, it rained for weeks. I mean, just if not all day, but every single day it rained. And so to know that I would get to a lean-to and I could dry my stuff out, I didn't have to get my tent wet, was just such a gift. And to have it to myself, even better. Hiking the Appalachian Trail, as I said, I did that in 2008, and it was building in popularity then. But from what I understand, it's just a thoroughfare now. And I really appreciate trails that are lesser traveled, because you get that time alone in the woods to attune to your surroundings and, go through whatever it is you need to go through in your head and just get lost in the hike. And it's not so much about socializing while you're actually hiking. Yeah, what else can I say about the Finger Lakes Trail? Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I would recommend it to anyone who's considering, and I'm sure if you're tuning in, you are considering, or you're a fellow end-to-ender. But it was an amazing experience, and as Scott said, to see the Catskills, the farmland, I mean, just the spectrum of terrain, Niagara Falls, and also those branch trails. They may not be the main trail, but definitely take time to check those out, because I feel like some of the most beautiful things I saw are on the branch trails. And for some reason I'm echoing.
You just started.
Let's see, maybe I'll mute and unmute real quick. Maybe that'll help. Okay, I think I'm good now. And I wouldn't have found out about the Mid-State Trail, which I'm presently on, had I not hiked the Crystal Hills branch, which takes you down to the Mid-State Trail. So, hiking some of these branches can inspire you too to find out about other trails. I remember well passing the long path at the FLT Eastern Terminus, I believe. Yes. And then I went on to hike the long path too. So hike the Finger Lakes Trail, and who knows what what other trails it may lead to as well.
So one of the questions I had for all three of you is if you were to do the hike you did again, but do one thing differently, what would you do differently? Did you hear me?
Yeah, the question was what. Oh, now I'm echoing.
I'm glad it's not just me.
Okay, seems okay. No, I'm echoing again. I would have read more history. Of the trail.
Heather, what would you have done differently?
If I could have, I honestly would have taken even more time out there, instead of I did some 20-mile days and high teen days, and, partly that was due to work commitments, but if I could have, I just would have slowed down, taken it in even more.
And Scott, what about you?
So I think there's two things, and I mentioned one already that I would have done differently. I would have taken more photos early on. That's one thing that I really regret, that I didn't take as many photos early on. The other thing, and this is just the personal thing, and I talked briefly about it, my first overnight, I really wish I had packed lighter. I was carrying about a 45, 50-pound pack for that through the Catskills. Way too much. But it gives me a wonderful story. It's a story that I tell people all the time. And surprisingly, it was not my worst hike. I don't even classify, because it was a challenge and it was an adventure and it was something I can tell. But those are the two things I'd probably change if I could.
All right, another question that came in to us this afternoon is, it seems like the east half of the FLT has some long sections without as many shelter and camping options. Were there sections that were hard finding good legal spots to stop for the night? It's like it's more for Marnie and Heather.
Yes, there were challenges there in the eastern part. And I'll be honest, I just found a good spot in the woods and threw down my tent. Not that I am encouraging other people to do that, but that is what I did, and I encountered nobody. I guess, I don't know that I had any folks take me in out that way, because you are pretty isolated. As far as I recall, don't quote me on that. Yeah, the Onondaga branch, I did have some help. But yeah, the Catskill region, I just camped where I could find a spot.
Yeah, I had a spot. It was more given. Because I had asked around because I was worried about this section. I knew I couldn't hike through without camping, and some member of the trail community offered a spot, which actually he had set up as a new bivvy site, new legal bivvy site. He just didn't want it popularized in public. So that may still exist. Since I did my hike in 2016, it may be more legit now, or there may be other places like that where the private landowner will give you permission if you just ask around ahead of time. And towards Claryville, because that lean-to, I don't know if it's still true, but Heather, the lean-to where you saw a bear, I think it was Brook at the end, like the last lean-to, it was drowned in bear scat when we passed it. And I said, we're not staying here.
That's why I didn't stay there either.
It kept going. Yeah, but past that, it's pretty tough because it's a real patchwork of public, and there's a lot of private hunting camps. You have to hike through them, and you just have to study your map and find the public parts of the woods around you, and just make sure you're camping in the public part. That was a little challenging.
Another question was about resupply preferences. Convenience stores, mail drops, or friends meeting you. How did you handle resupply? Both Heather and Marnie.
I mail to post offices, and they were all accessible from the trail. I just got one ride from the Trail Angel to the Dryden post office because I didn't want to take Alfred on a 5-mile road walk just for that. Yeah, I do post offices, and that means you have to carry longer distances. So I kind of have made my whole food system is arranged around the fact that I have to carry for longer distances. So it's not bulky. It's, I'm very compact. And my calorie needs, I usually actually start off like the Go Light guy used to advocate, like with all the weight on my body, like lots of fat on my body, and eat a more not super abundantly on the trail.
Yeah, I did do some mail drops, I believe, but again, the Finger Lakes Trail community was a huge help in, getting me into towns if I needed a ride. But most of my resupply was in towns. So I just would hit a town and hit a grocery. I think Wegmans, there were a good bit of Wegmans or a gas station, what have you, and just get along the way as I could. I really don't enjoy doing mail drops because it's such a commitment to get there. Oops, sorry, pardon, hold on. The toddler, the dog. You got to be careful with those tie outs in the tent. They will get tangled around poles. But yeah, mail drops, I find for me, if I can avoid them, I will, just because getting there on a weekday and getting there on time. However, I will say now hiking with a dog, that has changed my perspective dramatically because I need to have his food and I can't just leave him tied up outside a store while I go in. So from here on out, if the dog's with me, mail drops will be happening more regularly.
Scott, for you, we got a request. Is your blog available to the public?
Yes, it's available. Yep.
Can you drop the link in the chat?
Absolutely.
I'm trying to make myself not echo.
So it's real easy. It's just myname.com.
I'm looking through the questions in our chat. Somebody asked about doing the FLT through the thru-hike series. The answers in the chat. Yes, you can complete the entire FLT through the thru-hike series. I feel like
And there are a lot of people that actually do it that way too.
Oh, someone asked if you can camp the entire distance. Yes.
Yes.
And let's see, what else do we have in here? Someone was asking about grumpy neighbors. You know, by and large, I never experienced anyone very terribly grumpy. And I don't know about you, Marnie and Heather. I know I had at least 2 places which really surprised me where the trail went right up against a house, right through their yard, at least 2 or 3 times. And quite honestly, the first time I encountered it, it kind of freaked me out a little bit. Because I'm like, I see the blazes, but should I really be walking around the person's house?
Yes, I had that experience too. But never to have a be unwelcoming.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say something about the trail angels and about getting connected with trail angels and directing you to some resources. I did put a link in the chat to our End to Edge page on our website, and I neglected to mention earlier our end-to-end coordinator, Jackie Wensich, who can, her email is on the website on the page that I included in the chat. Jackie can connect you with car spotters, with trail angels. She can provide you with all kinds of So if you are planning or are doing an end-to-end, please reach out to Jackie. She can provide you with a lot of help. And I wanted to thank Jackie here, even though she doesn't do Zoom, so she's here, for everything that she does to support.
And one thing I'll add, Jackie and I actually got to know each other and communicated quite a bit along my hike. And actually, when I was out on M3 and finishing the hike around the casino in Salamanca, she happened to be out there and invited me over to her mobile home for dinner. So again, you know, the great community, the trail magic. And so I went over and had dinner with her. But one thing she wanted to kind of relay about car spotters and trail angels: don't assume that they're going to be able to help you. They're volunteers and they might not be able to. So make sure you have a backup plan or an alternate plan. She'll give you the list of people, but you know, if they have other obligations, they might not be able to help you. So don't expect just because they're on the list, they will help you all the time. I mean, most people will, but hey, life gets in the way sometimes. So.
A couple more questions. One came in that was specifically for the women. Did you have any concerns for your personal safety while hiking solo? And that's always, I think, an important topic to talk about, is not only concerns, but what precautions maybe you put into place, or what safety measures?
I didn't really feel concerned for my well-being, but I do take precautions. If I met a local in town and they saw my big backpack and they said, "Oh, you know, where are you going?" I would say where I'm headed to the eastern part of New York State, but I wouldn't say where I was camping. I would never say, "Oh, I'm going to go stay at that lean-to up on the mountain," or, "Oh, I'm staying in a hotel here in town." Like, I just would be very vague, and I'd say, "You know, I'm not really sure how many miles I'm going today." You know, same on the trail. Unless I felt certain that this was a hiker that could be trusted, I did not share that information. I also tried to be cautious about not sleeping near road crossings, where you'd have local folks coming out to party or what have you. But I felt overall, you know, quite safe, even walking the country roads. And I don't know, I feel when I walk a country road, I kind of just try to exude a presence, a presence of confidence and you know, not power, but a presence basically of I am not vulnerable. So I'd like to think that helps. I don't know.
Oh, Marnie, you're muted.
And I think I figured the echo out. I think it was me, Christy.
Oh.
And I hope it's fixed now.
Hope so.
I was
Yeah.
having technical issues earlier, almost didn't make it to the Zoom, so you know.
Well, thank you. I thought it was me, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, David Grant mentioned in the chat, he thought it was, every time I unmuted, we had the echo, so I think I've got it figured now.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, everybody.
All right, Marnie, you were going to respond.
No, I do all the same things as Heather. Those are all great suggestions. I also use my initial, and I don't use a gendered name in the registers as I pass through on my way to the next lean-to. And first surprising thing about the Finger Lakes Trail were how many residents along the way thought I should be worried, which really, like in their towns, they thought I should be worried. So, I don't know what they thought of their neighbors, but nobody concerned me. I mean, even the guy who admitted to me he had just gotten out of prison and like he was helping me find a place to stay that night. So like everybody was so nice. I had like one creepy experience because it was a drought year. I did my hike and a farmer offered me to camp on his field that had a swimming pond, and it was a drought and I was disgusting and I wanted it so bad. So I camped up there and then got propositioned like endlessly. But, you know, I was like, what am I doing? I should leave, but I really want to swim like so bad. So I did, and it was fine. It just goes to show like the crazy things you'll do to get clean.
Another question from Amy, who says she's finishing up her end-to-end in August of this year with a multi-day adventure to end on Slide. She's wondering about bear activity as well as water resources, as it looks like there are some spots that water is not that likely. And I don't know if anyone can speak to that, or I will say, you know, look definitely at the backs of the maps for information about water, but if any of you have more information on that you could share.
Yeah, I'd say look at the maps. As far as bear activity, the most places I saw bear were in the Catskills. I saw bear on 3 separate hikes while I was there.
But the water stuff, there's a lot of streams. I mean, I don't think water in the Catskills is a big problem unless we have a serious drought year. As a matter of fact, every once in a while you hit one of the reservoirs for New York City, so you can dip a little out of there too.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I feel like there's maybe a spring right on the other side. Oh, well, you're going up the Slide and then coming back. Yeah, I was going to say on the other side of Slide, I think there's...
If you go down a little bit, yeah, there's a spring there, yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the long path. And I did 100 miles through the Catskills on the long path, and I don't know that we saw a bear once. So kind of different experience than yours, Scott. So it may be the season, you know, that you're out. I know blueberry season brings them out big time, but
the one thing I will say with bear, and I've told other people that are getting into hiking on this, black bear in general, they're scaredy cats. They don't want to be around you. They don't want to be around humans. So your best bet is to stay still and let them pass. Don't antagonize them. And if you're camping out, yeah, take precautions with food. Don't leave food around. That's just asking for trouble. I mean, they're looking for something good to eat, so, you know. But as long as you just, you know, be sensible.
May I stick my 2 cents in here? I spent 30 years constantly working on trail maintenance and never saw a bear. Bear sign, yes, but I never saw the actual bear because I always had at least one dog with me.
Ah,
I think bear just stay away.
yeah, they will. Yeah.
So, Marnie, bring the dog.
You're muted again, Martin.
I don't see bears either. You're right. No,
Yeah, I wonder if it
we
was a
tend not
dog.
to. Things happen at night in the tent. Like the dog goes ballistic. He launches himself at the walls, and it's a crazy, like, you know, I don't know what's out there, but when hiking, I never see them.
So somebody just asked about using bear canisters or hanging food.
Yeah, Heather probably has input into this too. Now with the dog, I hung food on the AT. There's a lot of established things, but on the Finger Lakes Trail, there, you know, there's no bear hangs or bear boxes or anything. And I would hang food, but I ended up getting an ursack and not hanging anymore. I was sort of tired of how bad the food hanging was on the trees. It just seems to decimate campsites. And so you tie it around. This is like a bag made of Spectra, which is really, really tough fiber. It's hard to chew through, and you tie it around like a tree trunk so the bear can't run away with it. And it's really strong, keeps rodents out. Like if the bear does get it, they're probably gonna mash your food like to bits, chewing the bag. So I don't know that it's not a bear-proof solution, but that's what we did.
Okay. Yeah, I always hung my food just the old school way with my compression sack and some parachute cord. And honestly, I don't think I had a compression sack that was even rainproof, waterproof. So I would just put a trash contractor bag around that and hang it up. And it is a pain in the butt, you know, and you always kind of question if you've got it high enough and far enough away from the trunk of the tree. And you know, now hiking with a dog too, the weight of hoisting all that food up into a tree is pretty tremendous. But I have never had a bear get my food, knock on wood. So I guess it must work. It must work to some degree.
I think, you know, it's so uncrowded on the Finger Lakes. I can't imagine the lean-tos aren't attracting bears. There's not enough campers, so it's.
I think
so
that's
much...
a huge piece of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Heather, like you, when I did my overnights, and I didn't do a lot, but I did a few, and I just did it old school style too.
Yeah.
One thing I will say about hiking with dogs in the Catskills and the Allegheny is there's lots of porcupines. That's really what you want to be careful about with dogs, is the porcupines. And there's a couple of lean-tos, particularly in the Catskills, it actually says on the maps that are notorious for having porcupines, you know, come in and damage them, chew them. So yeah, there's a lot of porcupines around.
All right, well, Irene has 2 short dog stories she'd like to share if anyone's interested in listening to those. We are over time right now, so I'll also say if you do want to stick around, listen to Irene's stories, and unmute yourself and ask some questions if you'd like, you are more than welcome to. But if you have to, you know, sign off right now, I want to say thank you so much for coming, and I want to say publicly thank you so much to Marnie and to Scott and to Heather for coming and speaking with us tonight. Again, they volunteered their time, and I know this is all really valuable information, so we really appreciate it. I'm sure that you inspired people, and I'm sure that you helped and educated and informed, so thank you. All right, Irene.
Thanks, Christy. When I first started backpacking in the FLT in small increments, like a long weekend or even a week, before I got to a full week, I had been going out alone. And I'm telling you, overnight, I would get the whim-whams and start imagining things and blah, blah, blah. So I decided to try it with my dog along, and I felt much better. One time I was on the Appalachian Trail in Maryland. I'd had a sales meeting the weekend before. So I took my dog, boarded her for the sales meeting, and then the 2 of us took off, and we hiked all of Maryland on the AT. But our very first night, we got to a shelter. I had no idea there was a road really nearby through the woods. Before dark, a couple young people came along, so the shelter was fairly full by the time it was dark. Well, wouldn't you know it, we were all settling down, and there came laughing, drunken voices coming through the woods at us. And my little dog, Gummy, who had never acted out to her, growled the most wonderful, horrifying growl. And we could hear the drunks go, okay, we're going, bye. And they left. Yay, Gummy, who had never been fierce in her life before. So I decided that back on the FLT, I would take a dog with me on my hikes. And I was in the Catskills. We had had a long day, of course, going up and down and up and down. And we were at the bottom of one of the downs on a scarcely used dirt road, not far from it, camping in the woods. And oh, I know what it was. Up on the top of the last ridge we crossed, I started hearing howls. Coyotes, wolves, I don't know. But big brave Gummy moved closer to me and hid out. Thank you for your help, Gummy. But of course it was nothing. So that's it.
Thank you, Irene. Alfred's here.
Alfred, yay.
Alfred froze. And
Yep.
Marnie dropped a note in the comments saying that David Grant is here and that David Grant is the person who made the lovely bowl that she showed in her presentation.
Oh.
So hi, David, and thank you, David. That's really impressive. That thing's beautiful. And Marnie, you're muted if you're talking to us.
Yeah, thanks, David. It was great. Are you still making bowls?
Yeah, yes, I am, but nobody else has got an FLT bowl, so.
Oh no. My daughter and I store pine cones in it.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Place of honor on my desk.
Good.
All right, well, if there aren't any other questions, we'll say thank you and good night. Thank you again all for coming. We really appreciate it. And this has been recorded and I'll get it on our YouTube station and we'll be sending out a survey afterwards. So please let us know what you thought of the presentation tonight. And we are always looking for ideas of other topics that you might like to explore with us. So please give us any suggestions there as well. Thank you all. Thank you, Marnie. Thank you, Scott.
Bye. Thanks,
Heather.
Chrissy.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Marnie, bye, Heather.
Enjoy.
Hi, thanks for sharing your stories.
Thank you.
Good luck on your hike, Heather.
Thanks. Here's Amos.
Oh,
He's so big.
He is a big boy, 80 pounds.
oh, he looks like fun.
Yes.
How's he doing?
He's doing good. He's doing great. Yes, we've gotten into a good routine.
Good.
So it
How
was
much
it was
longer
yeah.
are you out?
What's that?
How much longer are you out on the trail?
I should be done this week.
Okay.
I'm thinking like maybe Wednesday-ish. Yeah. So we're at the tail end now. Yeah.
Enjoy.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you all. Nice to
Have a
see you.
good night.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming.